Greetings, everybody. Welcome to our fourth and final informational webinar on Senate Bill 752. Thanks for joining us, and our panelists are ready to go. My name is Katie Bonnet, and was the state organizer for Reform Alliance that worked towards getting this bill passed with the help of many others. And I look forward to moderating today, but we're going to kick it off with a video just to get us warmed up.
We begin this hour with one of the biggest hip hop artists in the game, Meek Mill. A law that he and his organization, the Reform Alliance, fought for took effect in Florida last month. It allows people to shorten their probation term by getting credits by going to school or working at least 30 hours a week. The law also allows people to check in remotely with their probation officers.
So there's a real problem with our probation system, how big it is, how bureaucratic it is. And what we saw were real solutions that were put on the table, conversations that happened across the board with unlikely allies everywhere in the state. And ultimately that momentum led to 100% support on one side, 100% support on the other side, and the signature by the governor.
It allows these probationers to report in with their probation officer virtually via Zoom or whatever other platform the Department of Corrections has.
Being a good family member, developing your social network, getting a job, going to school, all those kind of things become much harder rather than easier when you don't have remote reporting.
This financially takes the stress that you don't have to take a day off work, especially if you have to travel to get to a probation office. It allows for, consistency in their employment. It's great for business owners. It's great for the employers.
So the workforce achievement credits basically create a system in which if you meet a certain criteria in terms of how much work you're doing, you can get 30 days off of your probation. And trust me, as somebody who's been on probation, every single hour, every single day matters.
You need a job anyways to survive, right? So if I can, work, get paid from working and get credit to get out probation early, guess what? I'm working. I might get 2 jobs. For every education course that you complete, that's 60 days off your probation.
Whether it be college courses or vocational, all of those things will give them some credit toward their probation serve. Studies show, again, that people with stable employment and these forms of education are less likely to get in trouble again. In addition to the House members and the senators working collaboratively to pass these bills, it also requires members of the community and other stakeholders and other interested groups to really work and push.
With unlikely allies coming together and having conversations, and lo and behold, you see policy come out of it that really will impact people's lives in a positive way.
Reward people for doing the right thing. It's an incentive for them to do more right.
I can't help but have a positive impact.
Right now, our probation system has a lot of challenges, and this is a great step to ultimately fix that system so that people can truly re-enter the community and prosper. And when people prosper, when they re-enter the community, everybody benefits.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for Tralisha for sharing that video with all of us today. And that leads me to my first speaker. We're so happy to have Public Defender Mark Sims here from the 14th District. So he's coming at us from the Central Time Zone, which with some of us watching today are split. And we're so excited to hear about SB 752 and how it affects your role. And I'll kick it off to you. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you very much. This is my lunchtime, but I don't think me missing lunch is going to hurt me too bad, as you can tell. But anyway, I'm glad to be able to speak today. I am the elected public defender in the 14th Judicial Circuit. That entails 6 counties: as Jackson, Washington, Calhoun, Holmes, Bay, and Gulf counties. Those of you who don't recognize those counties and where they may be located, we are about an hour west of Tallahassee. And of course, a little bit further as you go in the different directions, but we're headquartered in Jackson County, but Panama City is our largest area. you know, we're still suffering the effects 4 years later after Hurricane Michael. And we've also had COVID, you know, has caused problems statewide, nationwide. And so we're still suffering from those effects. I'm excited about the Senate Bill 752 because it is an opportunity to possibly reduce caseloads when it comes to violations of probation, which is certainly something that we are struggling with at this time. You know, caseloads and all are a problem, but our VOPs are a problem because they usually are held without bond. They fill up our jails, and we have a lot of situations where they're set up for failure in the beginning. And the Senate Bill 752 method, I think, is going to be a huge step in the right direction in eliminating that setup for failure. Remote reporting, particularly in our area, is going to be extremely helpful because we are a rural community, although there are some larger cities in our circuit, but for the most part, we're very rural. As a matter of fact, unless the stats have changed, last time I looked, Jackson County, which is our second largest county population wise, has more dirt roads than any other county in the state of Florida. And so we are very spread out. And so remote reporting will be very advantageous in all situations in our circuit, because again, as you heard the lady say in the video, you don't have to take a day off to go and report. You're able to report electronically. You can do that from a job site, you know, just take a break and go call or do whatever it is, the way it's set up. And it would certainly induce more reporting. And it also would help with our violation of probations, because failure to report, I would imagine, would go down as we see this bill take effect. Also, one of the challenges that we have here in our area is we're a very economically depressed area. And so the education requirements will help put people in the job force that normally may not have that opportunity. Now, there's some things that, you know, there's going to be some things that we need to iron out. You know, are there going to be financial aid possibilities, that kind of stuff? What is there out there as far as helping them get those educational credits that they're looking for? But that's, you know, that's another fight for another day. But it's certainly a step in the right direction. It gives them an incentive, a want to better themselves, which we have a lot of people that they're kind of caught up in that cycle. That, you know, they basically are living with a label. I'm a loser and I can never be anything but a loser. But when you got probation telling them, hey, you can, you know, get certain incentives by getting yourself educated and be able to be a better citizen and also be a part of the workforce, it makes people change their attitudes, gives them a little 4-letter word called hope that they can break out of this cycle. And so I'm excited about that. As far as working and getting credits and incentives, as far as working, I think it's going to be, you possibly could get 30 days off, or if you do 30 hours a week for 6 months, you get 30 days off for every 6 months, among other things. I think that's going to be good because the more people are working, the better the economy gets. And if they're busy, my father always told me, he said, idle hands and idle mind is the devil's workshop. But if they're out working and doing the things that they know to be doing to provide for their families and provide for themselves, then it's less likely that they are going to get tied up into things that will lead to new law violations or violations of probation. So I'm excited about Senate Bill 752. I think I've got a unique perspective in talking about these things, in that I was a assistant state attorney for 14 years. And so I've been on the other side of the fence, and being in this area, I as a prosecutor, I just could not understand why we were putting all these conditions on people that, you know, like, for example, we give them so many financial obligations to pay, and they're in trouble because they didn't have money to start with. And so that I think this is a step in the right direction to help not set them up for failure, but to help them get the tools they need to succeed. And so I can't tell you how excited I am about this. I think it's a good thing. It'll, you know, or is there going to be changing circumstances or tweaking that needs to be done as we go? Absolutely. And I think the department will address that as we go, as we see what the needs are and how we can fine tune this. But I think the legislature is doing the right thing, giving the department the authority to be able to tweak and fine tune things and be able to provide a better service to the community. And that's about all I got to say.
Wonderful. Well, Public Defender Sims, I'm going to kick over to Ven. If you can stay for the duration, we'd love for you to, but if you've got time for just a few questions, just depending on your schedule, Ven, your turn now.
Great. Yeah. Thanks so much. Your perspective is so unique and interesting, and I think really insightful. And when we talk about these provisions, we know like they're only as successful as their implementation, right? And reform prides itself on working at on the ground with all these local organizations. So my question for you is, how can grassroots organizations and other public defenders help ensure the successful implementation of these provisions that we just talked about?
Well, I think public defenders can be vigilant and make sure that things are going as we had anticipated they would go with this bill. I think communication, as an elected public defender, communication with my people that are in the ranks that are handling these. Now, I also have had to actually take on caseload as an elected public defender because of our workforce problems that we have here. I think the whole state is experiencing on the government side. And so I can see some things firsthand, but I think the public defenders have to communicate with their employees, with their assistants, and know what is going on. Also, I think it's important to talk with the probationers themselves and to talk with their employers and other people that are involved with the system indirectly to get their input and to understand, is this working? Now, how do we do that? I don't know if the department needs to set up some type of open house. I mean, not open house, but like a town hall meeting or something for those who are direct and indirect stakeholders. I don't know what the answer to that would be, but something along those lines where you have communication from everybody involved, because communication is the key. It won't work unless we know that there are problems or we know that there's adjustments to be made. And if we don't talk about them, if we don't have the venue to do that, then it's not going to work as well as we intend for it to work.
That's great. Thank you. I have another question for you, and you might have touched on this a little bit in your opener, but I think it's helpful to cover it again and maybe provide some more details. So what do these credits and remote reporting mean to your clients as a public defender, and how do you think it would impact their cases?
Well, as far as their case goes, I don't know how much it would impact the actual case because the case has already been litigated, and that's why they're on supervision. Now, it will impact their cases in that it may result in less violations down the road. So we have a lot of violation probations where, sometimes they get a second chance, they get placed on house arrest or something else, or do a little jail time, and then come back out and add a few more conditions, which normally sets them up for failure. A lot of times they wind up, probation is just putting off or delaying a prison sentence is what it has kind of developed into. With this, I think we're going to see a change in that. I think you're going to have probationers that are wanting to do things that are positive. You're going to have probation officers that are actually encouraging positive activity rather than looking for ways to knock them down. And I think when you have that collaboration between the officer and the probationer and the other people that are involved, the judges, prosecutors, public defenders, I think you're going to see that a lot of people are going to successfully complete, and we're not going to have the recidivism that we normally have. At least that's the hope. As far as the remote reporting, again, that's going to cut down on the violations of probation for lack of reporting. We have a lot of absconding VOPs where they missed a report. Well, why didn't you go ahead and report the next time? Well, I knew I done messed up, so I didn't want to come back in. And so they wind up digging a hole deeper for themselves. I think with the remote reporting, we're going to avoid that problem for the most part. I think there's going to be a few instances where they're irresponsible and don't call in like they're supposed to. But I think we're going to see a lot less of the failure to report, aka absconding, than what we have seen in the past. the educational incentives, the work incentives, again, all are going to be positive in getting people to contribute to society. And at the same time, it's going to cut our caseloads, going to cut our intervention in their lives down more so, I believe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sims, for joining us. If you can stay, we'd love for you to, but regardless, it was awesome to have you share from your very unique perspective as a public defender, and also from your region. So with that, we're going to move on to our next speaker, Tammy Marcus, who has been with us this is her fourth webinar with Reform and our partners. She represents the probation officers for the Police Benevolent Association. She actually has a big meeting with the department right after this today. And Tammy, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to you.
A little different than usual. I'm usually in my office. My name is Tammy Marcus. I am the state probation officer chapter president for the Florida PBA. I represent the 2,000 probation officers that are employed by the Florida Department of Corrections. And I guess more importantly, I am one of those probation officers, actually a supervisor. And how a lot of people ask, well, how did Florida PBA get involved in this bill? Katie with Reform, she actually approached Matt Puckett, who is our lobbyist with the Florida PBA, and she was seeking support from PBA on support of the bill. Matt said, I really can't support it or get behind it until our probation officer president reviews it, and it's all good. We'll give the thumbs up. So I linked up with Katie through Matt, and received this very comprehensive draft legislative bill. And as I read it, and I say comprehensive because it included things, and it included a lot of things that we were already doing at the Florida Department of Corrections, such as the alternative sanctions and the remote reporting. Our initial form of remote reporting was called independent reporting status, and that was where minimum classified folks on supervision could go into this non-reporting active suspense status. And as long as they remained in compliance, they could continue. So it wasn't permanent. Then about 3-4 years, we migrated to a web base based on biometrics reporting, where they could again not have to report to the office. And again, it was for those minimum classified offenders on supervision. So there are exclusions to the folks that can do remote reporting. So when we got the draft, I was thinking, well, the only thing that we weren't doing were the educational and employment credits. But in some aspects of that, we didn't have the authority, because as much as we're in the second chance business with probation, we're also in the public safety business. So things like people on for sex offender probation, sex offenders, those were exclusions that, having those meetings and conversations, we had to exclude those ones that for public safety purpose, and also exclude the folks that we really don't have the supervision, the authority to reduce their sentence, like the conditional release cases that come out of prison. Those are actually under the authority of the Florida Commission on Offender Review, formerly the Parole Commission. So once we got those cases out that we really didn't have the authority, and created those exclusions from the bill, we came up with crafted a piece that I think that we realistically could do at the Department of Corrections. We also took into consideration our 40-year-old antiquated database, whereas if we were the original draft proposed, I think it was a monthly reduction in time, and we would have been chasing, manually adjusting those sentence structures on a monthly basis, and that would have been a daunting task for the probation officers, and we would have pretty much lost the supervision part. Like I said, we're in the second chance business. We have a lot of evidence-based practices to try to navigate our folks through supervision. We have the merit-based activity, which that is a incentive for those on house arrest, or better known as community control, to be able to earn 4 hours. to be able to go to a family function, something that is normally not approved on such a strict form of supervision. So, we've done a lot of these things over the period to help everybody complete supervision. And I know the public defender was saying, a lot of violations, but we essentially still have 60% of our population successfully complete supervision. And out of that 60%, 90% never return within a 3-year period to supervision or incarceration. So we feel those numbers are pretty remarkable, and continuing to do and those incentives is probably going to make our numbers go up even higher, much like the public defender stated in his comments. So I wanted to thank Katie for bringing us to the PBA, to a seat to the table, to have these discussions prior to the actual committee hearings, so we could have those conversations and get those exclusions out of the way before drawing lines in the sand in the committee meeting. So thank you again for those partnerships, and we look forward to seeing the successes that these incentives can have for the folks on supervision with us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tammy. It was certainly an honor and a pleasure working with you and Matt and the rest of the PBA in the few years it took us to get to this point. And your voice and expertise, I think, really got us where we needed to be. So, and also gave us a lot of cover as it moved through. So thank you so much for tirelessly working with us and our team and the PBA for all that you guys did to really help us get this across the finish line. So similarly, to crafting bills, I know that you'll be having a meeting with the department very soon and might have to depart a little early. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to kick it over to Ben to do some questions now. And of course, please stay on as long as you can and let us know, but different orders today. All right, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Tammy. I have a quick question for you. So it kind of branches off what you just talked about. I guess just looking for a more specific example, if you wouldn't mind sharing one. Is there an example of a time when you helped someone pursue their educational goals or find work? And how might these workforce and education credits have helped with that if they were in place then?
We are doing a lot of job fairs, reentry fairs. We have employment specialists in all of our 20 circuits. And we had a job fair one time that we even had all of the officers in our circuit, I work in Broward County, donate clothing and accessories and all kind of things for people to have to go to an interview. And we just had a lot of people that came to and got the clothing, and they were so appreciative of it and just the communication that we had. And I think they actually saw us as, wanting to help them successfully complete supervision, because I think a lot of folks think that we're in the violating business. I even almost heard from the public defender speaking. I mean, we don't want to do violations. When we have to do a violation report, it's for non-compliance issues. And having these reentry fairs, we have a lot of people hired on the spot. The people are so appreciative of, just everything. And there's a lot of probation officers that attend these because they're referring their clients to these job fairs and hoping that they'll get these jobs. And, just many people have thanked us, while at these job fairs for the clothes, for the, getting the jobs there, where some were hired on site, learning how to do resumes. Some of the folks that got out of prison and, had been in prison didn't even know how to operate a cell phone, and showing them how to operate a cell phone, how to, put something on their calendar on their cell phone. So it was the little things like that I've been doing this job for almost 32 years. So there's so many things that I could say. But a lot of times it's just the thank you.
That's great. And do you think maybe if the workforce credits were in place, like during these job fairs or in future job fairs, now that the credits are in place, do you think those would provide those clients with the kind of extra motivation they need to seek out employment or maintain it?
Exactly. Anytime you incentivize anything, it's like, you tell your kid to clean the room and you'll take them to, their favorite place. We feel that you incentivize things. It's going to give them hope. It's going to encourage them to get these educational credits or keep the employment, bring in the documentation, and in the end game to actually reduce time off their sentence. And as my motto always is, it's do what you got to do so you can do what you want to do. So just explain to them, hey, if you do this, you're going to get this. And a lot of times, that goes a long way for them. And as the public defender mentioned, idle time leads to things they shouldn't be doing. And we found that most people, when they're gainfully employed and working, they're less likely to commit new offenses and the violations. So I believe it's going to be a big incentive, and I guess we'll see later on down as, the time period, first 6 months, we'll be able to see exactly how many of those folks take advantage of those incentives and credits. And he also mentioned something about town hall meetings. We do have town hall meetings with all of the shareholders with Department of Corrections around the state. So I think they do a really good job of communicating with the community, and like I said, with probation officers, with our folks on supervision, and every incentives that we have available, trying to get, because like I said, we would much rather do a successful completion letter of supervision than do a violation report.
Thank you. And one last question. So I know you've been with us for all 4 of these webinars that we've done. So thanks for spending all that time with us over the past several weeks. And I thought we kind of, as a final question, end on a positive note and ask, what has been your proudest achievement as an officer?
Oh God, proudest achievement. That's too many to name. I guess
that's a good thing.
Mark Twain said, I can live 2 months on a good compliment. And just getting, when I explain things to people on supervision, sometimes using it as a supervisor, when the officer might need, help in assisting someone that's going through a difficult time, just that communication. And I had one person that was on supervision, young girl, pregnant, on drugs. We got her into a program, and she completed the program, and she came back, and her and her mother were just thankful that we actually took the time, realized something was going on, and got her the help that she needed.
That's amazing. So powerful. Thanks, Tammy. I will kick it back to you, Katie.
Well, thanks again, Tammy. Again, please stay on as long as you were able. Thanks for joining us today en route, in transit, and for all 4, as has been mentioned. It's been a pleasure working with you and having you and your unique perspective, and very important one for all of these. So we really appreciate it. And I can't believe 32 years. That must have meant that you started being a probation officer at 6 or something. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, 12, something like that.
I can't believe that.
I wish I could stay, but I really got 2 minutes to get in the door. So thank you.
Totally understood.
Have a great time. I look forward to seeing the rest of the show when it is recorded.
Thank you so much. Really do appreciate it, Tammy.
Right.
Well, that leads us to our next speaker with Reform, Rachel Goldstein, our Senior Implementation Manager. She's going to get a little more in the weeds and the meat of SB 752. So your turn, Rachel.
Thank you, Katie. So again, my name is Rachel Goldstein. I'm Reform Senior Implementation Manager, and I would argue that I have the coolest job at Reform because I get to work once the legislation is passed with implementing agencies on the ground to help ensure that the legislation is implemented in a way that benefits as many people as possible and that qualify for it. So before I get started, I want to take us back into how we ended up in Florida, the how and the why. So in 2020, Florida had the 5th largest probation population in the country, with 1 in every 98 adults in Florida being on some form of probation. As of 2022, the beginning of this year, approximately 94,000 individuals were on state felony probation, and nearly 5,000 individuals in the state of Florida were on misdemeanor probation. According to the Florida Department of Corrections, the median felony person under supervision is serving a 3-year sentence, while the average sentence sometimes is greater than even 4 years. When we talk about some of the provisions in the bill, such as credits. When we were coming to Florida, we looked at other states and what other things were going on, especially in the South. And a lot of other states have already adopted incentive credits. States like Mississippi, South Carolina, Louisiana, Missouri, Texas, and they've seen great impact. And so that was something that we looked at when we were trying to figure out with our coalition, what could we do in Florida legislatively that would be accepted and be bipartisan. That was really important, especially in Florida. The success rate, just to go back to a couple of more statistics, the success rate for people on community control, which is a form of supervision, basically house arrest, is only at 28%. And in part because, like a lot of people have mentioned already, the lack of hope and not really having the freedom to do a lot of things. Most people who commit new crimes or face a series of technical violations do so within the first 1 to 2 years under supervision. So again, usually if someone's going to have issues, it's going to happen within the first year to 18 months. Before I get into the provisions, I want to explain one more thing that's specific to Florida, and that's how the probation system is set up. So each state probation is set up differently. In Florida specifically, the Florida Department of Correction oversees community control, which is essentially, like I said, that house arrest, felony probation, and some misdemeanor probation. And a lot of those misdemeanor cases are the cases that were originally felonies, but then were pled down to misdemeanors once they got into court. So that's what Florida Department of Corrections oversees. Then there's local probation that's run by the counties, and local probation oversees misdemeanor level probation. So there are 2 different probation systems in Florida, and that's important to understand as we get into the specific provisions of SB 752. So with that, Tralisha, do you mind sharing our slides? Thank you. So we're first going to talk about earned credits. We're going to start with our educational credits. So this applies to people only on Florida Department of Corrections, felony supervision, or community control. So those folks are eligible to obtain educational credits, which results in a 60-day reduction of their term of supervision if they are compliant with the terms and conditions of their supervision, and earn an educational diploma or degree or vocational certificate that's recognized by the Florida Department of Corrections. So again, some of these qualified activities are getting a GED, getting a high school diploma, those vocational certificates, which includes technical trades like HVAC, plumbing, being an electrician, and the Florida Department of Corrections can approve other educational activities, and those are decisions that they're currently making now. So in order to receive those credits, you just have to show proof that you completed those courses. So once you get your diploma or show that you have obtained that education or that certificate, you would share that with your officer. And again, that's for a 60-day reduction in your term of your term of supervision. So if you get multiple diplomas or you continue to advance your educational opportunities, you can get more, you can add another 60 days. We know that that is very time consuming, but education definitely helps achieve not only your own goals, but maybe career goals and aspirations as well. So as we move into our workforce achievement credits, again, this is eligible, any person under community control in the Florida Department of Corrections probation is eligible to obtain workforce achievement credits, which results in a 30-day reduction of their term of supervision if they're compliant with the terms and conditions, and you work consistently for 6 months, averaging 30 hours per week in a paid position. So let me rephrase that. So you have to be employed for 6 months and average 30 hours per week. The reason that it's an average is we understand that You might work a construction job where you're laid off for a week or two, but then you might have another time where you work a lot of overtime. And so the Florida Department of Corrections is being lenient in that as long as it's averaging that 30 hours and you're employed consistently, that you can get that 30-day reduction. So if you remain employed, you could get that 30-day reduction every 6 months if you are continuously working. So let's talk about how we track how, if you're the one working, how you're going to track that. So that's in part collecting pay stubs or having, again, some sort of proof that you've worked an average of 30 hours per week and that you provide that to your probation officer. The benefits of these incentives is for people that are under supervision, you get time off of your supervision, and it also aligns with maybe some of the own goals that you've set for yourself around your career goals and enhancing your education. For our probation officers on the calls, more incentives for the people you work with is an extra tool for you to build a more collaborative working relationship and to have more tools in your tool belt. And obviously, as we think about the benefits to the whole community with this idea of community safety, and if people are investing in education and working, that we create safer communities and also supporting financially communities and giving back. So those are the provisions around earned credits. Again, just want to emphasize this is for people under community control and Florida Department of Corrections felony probation. Next slide, please. Okay, so the second provision is around, third technically, is around remote reporting. And Florida was already doing remote reporting for different caseloads. They had some administrative caseloads. So for this provision in particular, this pertains to both Florida Department of Corrections and also local probation, so misdemeanor. So probation throughout the whole state of Florida can benefit from this provision. And what it does is it gives state and local probation authority to create a permanent remote reporting system. And what that means is really that there's a written policy in place around remote reporting. And a lot of jurisdictions, like I mentioned, already use some type of remote reporting. And what we hope to see is that this is an expanded tool that is used for officers to conduct meetings, compliance checks with people under supervision virtually using approved technology platforms. And each jurisdiction can come up with what platforms are going to work for them. Some examples, I like to think of remote reporting as a continuum. You might have a low risk caseload that is maybe all administrative, and maybe they're people that are just sending a mail-in report or doing telephone reporting. And then, on the other side of the continuum, you might have someone that's someone that needs more services, and maybe you still see them in person, but you every once in a while allow them to check in through a video application like Zoom or Teams or Google Meet when there might be a barrier such as transportation, to use every once in a while as a tool for officers to have more flexibility, and again, building that rapport. So the benefits to remote reporting, obviously it helps reduce barriers for people who are on supervision. It's already hard to be on supervision with all the rules and restrictions, but then add trying to get to the probation office when you have to work, or when you have child care issues, or your car breaks down. Again, it can act as an incentive or a tool for officers, can lessen the burden on officers physically always having to go to a house, giving them more flexibility in their discretion. And it also allows officers and probation offices to allow more flexible schedules with officers. So for example, we know a lot of people work 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, and that's a lot of times when probation offices are open. So, using a video platform or some other form of remote reporting can allow people to check in at unorthodox times and work with their officer to do that. So it really allows that flexibility. And a lot of us, during COVID, this whole field really had to adjust. And so we're hoping that, we solidify some of the things we learned in COVID to make permanent policy and procedures around that in local offices and at the Florida Department of Corrections. Next slide, please. So how to become a reformer. So it is so imperative that we work together. This takes a community effort to work together in Florida specifically, but also throughout the United States. And so part of that is becoming a reformer. So if you visit our website at www.reformalliance.com, you will see a place where you can register. What that allows is for you to get all of the information, where we are, what we're doing, how you can get involved. We're also on all of the social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, you name it, we're on there. So please follow us. And if you have ideas or think that we can do things on the ground in Florida, we would love to hear from you. So with that, I will turn it back over to Katie, and thank you all for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rachel. So that takes us to our next speaker today, someone I'm very fortunate to have met early on when reform decided to see what was possible to change in Florida. I'm actually coming at you from my kitchen today, so that's apropos, maybe. Rebecca Kelly Manders, we met via BBARC, which is the Big Bend After Reentry Coalition. She runs an amazing program called Refire Culinary here, and also has a very unique lens from which to view the probation system and what could be better. And we talked about that very early on, and really just appreciate her insight and her work in reentry, and of course her personal story. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Rebecca. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everybody. I am Chef Rebecca Kelly Manders. I'm the director and founder of the Refire Culinary Program, which is an 8-week culinary training program for anyone with a felony conviction. We run 5 cohorts a year. We are coming into our 5th anniversary here in the next 2 weeks, and we have had 72 successful graduates of our program. So we're very pleased and proud of that. Prior to starting the Refire program, I was the chef and owner of a gourmet style food truck here in Tallahassee called Street Chefs, and ran that truck for just about 11 years until I sold it to one of my former employees. So I've been on the reentry side of things, I've been on the employer side of things, and I've also been on the probation side of things. I've spent 8 years of my life on probation between 2 states, Alabama and Florida. 0 out of 10 would recommend. Neither one were exceptional, but this was also in the 90s. And I'm so happy to see these changes finally coming in for our system, for the people who have to be on probation, for those that are in the supervision side of things, and then for people like myself who are employers or offering training for people. One of the stories that I shared with Katie when she was working to get SB 752 through was of one particular employee that I had for my food truck who lives just over the state line in South Georgia. Technically, he lives in Cairo, Georgia, and was arrested for a property damage DUI offense, and was put on a pretrial release program, and then put on probation that required him to have to go and report and give random urinalysis sometimes 3 times a week. He didn't know until he had to call in the morning for a lot of things. And so it was really, really difficult to schedule around all of that for work. And because I know what it's like to be on probation, I was very sympathetic and very willing to work with him. But I know a lot of employers aren't, and especially in the restaurant industry, it's very, very cut and dry. You're either here working or you're not. And that's, there's no middle ground to that. It's not a traditional, like as I tease my wife who has a one of these jobs, a desk job, and I say, if you don't get your work done, you can always pick it up tomorrow. If I don't get my work done, somebody doesn't get a meal. So having these things like remote reporting, the credits for working, the credits for vocational certificates, these are amazing, amazing things that are going to help so many people. I'm already extremely excited for our upcoming students and those who have graduated since this bill went into effect in July, so that they can start the process of getting with their probation officers and talking to them and saying, this is what I'm doing, this is what I've done, here's my certifications, to start shaving off that time. Because anytime you can shave off is fines, is certain supervision fees that you don't have to pay. It's one less thing you have to worry about in the road to just becoming a normal everyday person in society, which is what I think almost every single person on probation wants. There's when I was first arrested in 1994 for my first felony charge, the first job interview I had after I was convicted, the guy who ended up hiring me said, there are good people who do stupid things and there are bad people who do bad things. And I think you're just a good person who did stupid things. And I was like, yeah, that pretty much well sums it up. And I wouldn't make the decisions I made, 20 plus years ago today, because a lot of those decisions were made because of my drug and alcohol problems. And when we start looking at the root causes of why people are reoffending and why people are offending in the first place, then we can start really working towards that restorative nature, which I really want to see our criminal justice system do more of a pivot to. Here in Leon County, we have a recidivism rate of about 26%. And that's over a 3-year period. Here at the Refire Culinary Program, amongst our graduates, our recidivism rate is just under 10%. I believe it's 9.8% of our graduates reoffend. So we're really, really excited about the work that we're doing here and the training that we're offering to our students and graduates, and the lifelong connection that we offer to them. We offer them case management for a year post-graduation, but I am here to tell you that I have people who graduated in 2018 that still give me a call and say, hey, chef, would you, and absolutely, give them every resource I can, because these are people who just want to put their past behind them and move forward to being happy, productive members of society, just like everybody else. So this is an incredible advance. And I hope it's just the beginning of probation and supervision reform and criminal justice reform here, not just in the state of Florida, but nationwide.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for sharing. I think Ben might have a couple of questions for you as well, if you have some time. Great. So go ahead, Ben.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. And congrats on the upcoming 5-year anniversary of Refire. That's amazing. And it's great to have, your perspective as an employer and as someone who specifically employs people on probation. As you know, part of this bill's mission and reform's mission in general is to make probation more of a pathway to employment, wellness, reentry, redemption for folks across the country. So as someone who employs people on probation, what do these incentives and the permanent support for remote reporting mean to you as a business owner / employer?
Well, I think it's great all the way around. It's going to be less time off that someone has to take to go and report. Right now we have the Refire program is structured where it's 4 days a week and we don't come in on Mondays, just so the students have that day so they can go to the doctor or do anything they need to do. Making sure that they have that ability to go and report to their probation officer is key. We reach out to probation officers to help get any pre-existing appointments rescheduled, but to have the ability to report remotely is a game changer. Here in Tallahassee, our public transportation system is not the best in the world, and it can take hours to ride the bus to get to one of the 2 probation offices here in town. And to not have to spend that time traveling, to not have to worry about missing your reporting appointment because of transportation or things like that, it's a game changer. It's just truly a game changer.
Definitely. Thank you. And you mentioned at the end of your intro there that this is a good step in the right direction. So in that vein, what else would you change about the probation system from an employer's perspective, a business perspective, or just your perspective? What else would you change?
How much time do we have?
I guess let's pick one.
The remote reporting is as an employer, remote reporting is great. It's one of the things that I encourage prospective employers for hiring our graduates, the ones who have shied away from, well, I don't want to hire somebody who's on probation. I'm like, why not? You have a built-in safety net. This is somebody who absolutely 200% needs this job. So why wouldn't you want to hire somebody who's on probation? I try and turn what's deemed societally as a negative into a positive. Some other things that I would love to see happen is I would really love to see probation, instead of it just being a punitive, basically glorified babysitting gig. I would love to see them really work towards working with people on probation to create permanent change in their life. Let's look at things restoratively. Let's look at a person holistically. Why did they commit the crime they committed? Was it a drug and alcohol issue? Was it a trauma-based issue? Was it a crime of opportunity? Let's get to the root cause. And if we can fix the root cause, then we'll be able to lessen the number of people who are involved in the criminal justice system, period. And it seems like a daunting task, but really plenty of other countries around the world are looking at their criminal justice systems in more of a holistic, restorative manner than just in the punitive manner that we focus on in our country. And I really would love to see that shift. Offer workshops, offer training, work with the community college, work with therapists, work with some other resources in the community to assist people to find out what those root causes are. And let's start working to fix those root causes. Because if I hadn't have had the drug and alcohol problem that I had 20 years ago, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today.
Thank you so much. Very well
Absolutely.
said. I think we're going to move into the audience Q&A session now, right, Katie? Great. So if you're in the audience, you've been listening to our speakers, you have a question for Rebecca or Rachel, feel free to use Zoom's Q&A function at the bottom to submit your question. I know we are coming up against time here, so I will kick things off with maybe one question for each of our panelists, and we'll wait and see if any come in via the Q&A feature in the meantime. So Rachel, this question's for you. As a former probation officer yourself, why are incentives important to the culture of supervision, and how can these credits impact success rates on either probation or public safety?
Yeah, Ben, that's a great question. So as a former probation officer, I would say that the more tools you can have in your tool belt to work with people and to find positive ways to motivate them and align with goals that they've set for themselves, that really the role of a probation officer is more, and this kind of falls into what Rebecca was talking about, is more of a coach. That's how I saw my role. And so having those incentives around pro-social activities, and by the way, education and employment are usually part of risk assessments that officers use to determine how likely someone is to reoffend. And so when you address those dynamic factors and you have incentives to do it, you're going to see that's going to help, again, not only with your relationship with those that you serve, but that they're going to gain confidence, and that's going to help them on their path to well-being and to also keep communities safer.
Thank you. It's great. And Rebecca, this question's for you. So we've kind of talked a lot about it over the last hour, but in kind of summation, how can we continue to make probation more of a pathway towards employment, wellness, reentry, and redemption?
I think that the first thing we can do is make sure that if someone is put on probation, that they're put on probation in such a way that they are being set up for success. Like Rachel said, like my experience has been there's two kinds of probation officers. There's the social worker model, and then there's the probation officer that really wanted to be in law enforcement. And they're very strict and very punitive. And I've run across both in the time that I was on probation and now in years later working with my students. I think that there's a lot of monetary cost to the person on probation that we really need to look at and really need to address. In Leon County, if they require you, if you're on certain kinds of probation and they want you to take a urinalysis, that's something that you might have to pay for out of pocket. There are, fees associated to reporting to probation. Most of my students, most of my graduates that were incarcerated in Florida that were offered gain time, most of them declined, and the ones that did take their gain time, found out really quickly that it's a trap. It's just a way. Probation is seen as a way to set you up for that next violation. And I would really like to see the mindset shift to more of, as Rachel was saying, more of a coaching situation, more of a, we are here to help you step from this part of your life to the next part of your life. And from a place where you made some decisions for whatever reason. Now let's talk about what other decisions you could have made. Let's talk about resources that you might not have known that were available to you. If you don't have resources available to you, let's figure out how we can get you resources to make things a little easier. Make it where you can get a good paying job that pays a decent living wage. Make it that you do have a marketable skill that will help you bring in income so that you can afford the things that we all need to afford, food, shelter, clothing, having a little money in my pocket so that I can have a pizza on Friday night if I want, just to be able to live a happy, productive life, free from restraint, free from the sense of permanent incarceration that most of us that have been incarcerated or have been on probation for extended periods of time feel. I haven't been inside incarcerated in a cell since 2006 was the last time I was arrested. And I still to this day have a permanent sense of incarceration where I feel like at any second they're going to come banging on my door and snatch me up in the middle of the night. These are the kind of trauma-centered things that we need to really address, with people who are on probation and with people who are supervising, working a trauma-informed care aspect into supervision, I think would be key to reducing recidivism and providing people hope and the chance to take their lives in a different direction.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was great. And I think it actually leads me into our final plug from the reform end, which is part of what we do here is try to change the narrative around parole and probation and supervision. And what that means from our end is sharing people's stories of their experiences within the system. So we've met with countless people across the country who've been system impacted, and we try to share stories and narrative change on social media and on our website to try to get the word out and kind of shift the narrative around this issue. So if you know someone, if you've worked with someone, if you yourself are system impacted, please share this link or fill out the survey yourself. I'm dropping our share your story form in the chat right now. It's very important work, and any way you can spread the word about it would be very much appreciated. And with that, I'll hand it back to Katie.
Wonderful. Well, and just as an extra note to the stories link, and also to Rebecca's last answer to a question, our partners at Fines and Fees Justice Center also passed some really great legislation this past session related to the fees for those that are on supervision. So anyone on here or watching this recording, reach out to your county clerk of court, which you can easily find online. That may be in a different county where the offense may have occurred. So just make sure you can look up many, and they'll certainly work with you to help you with those fines and fees and coming up with payment plans. So another bright light from this past legislative session. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists. I know that the public defender and Tammy both had to hop off early, but if they watch the rest of this later, thank them for joining. Thank you so much, Rebecca Kelly Manders, for sharing as well. On the reform side, of course, thank you, Rachel, Ben, and Tralisha. It's been so much fun these past 4 working with you. Friendly reminder, this will be available on our site, the Florida Safety Coalition website. You'll probably receive a follow-up email, that along with all the other 3 prior webinars that we've held. Another special thank you to the Florida Police Benevolent Association for co-hosting and spreading the word, along with our partners at Americans for Prosperity Florida, Operation New Hope, Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, Florida Cares, Florida Policy Institute, Alliance for Safety and Justice, Right on Crime, and of course the Florida Public Defenders Association. Many participants from there throughout these past 4, and of course they helped us get our public defender perspective today. So thanks everyone so much for joining. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be a part of this, and enjoy the rest of your day.